because thou besoughtest me. Shouldst not thou then have had compassion also on thy fellow servant, even as I had compassion upon thee? And his Lord, being angry, delivered him to the torturers until he paid the debt. So also my heavenly Father do unto you, if you forgive not everyone his brother from his heart, from your hearts. That's what the words of today's Holy Gospel. Father and Son and Holy Ghost, amen. Today, the 21st Sunday after Pentecost, and also this 18th day of October, in 2015 here, feast of St. Luke the Evangelist. As it says in the epistle, many weapons, but let our feet be shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. And the gospel, four gospels, St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, and St. John. These are the four evangelists. And the gospel is the good news. The gospel is the only way to the kingdom of heaven. We must, preparation of the gospel of peace, we must walk in the gospel of peace. The gospel is what carries us. We have the shield of faith, and then the shield of faith protects us, the helmet of salvation, and so on. The faith, of course, is everywhere, and we must walk in the gospel. So today is a brief consideration of these four gospels, St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, and St. John, which are prophesied in the Old Testament. When Ezekiel tells us about the four animals with heads on four sides, and that they're looking in four different directions, and the wings, those magnificent creatures, and they go backwards and to the north and the south and move in all directions. And these four creatures having four different heads, one the head, four angels that have four different heads, one the head of a man, next the head of an oxen, third the head of a lion, and the head of a lion, and then the head of an eagle. The head of an eagle. And so the lion, the second one, the eagle, the oxen, the third one, and the eagle, the fourth. We can see these four symbols. The church tells the fathers, those are the symbols of the four evangelists: Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, and St. John. And these four evangelists, there are four ways of learning the Holy Gospel, four different ways of the spiritual life, four levels of climbing to God. And so St. Matthew is the first one. He was the one that preached to the Jews, and he had the face of a man. And the fathers tell us he's given the face of a man because the Jews were the only rational people in the Old Testament. All the rest were as beasts, because the Jews were the only ones that knew that the Messiah was coming, and that he was the only answer to all the troubles in the world. And they knew the sin of Adam, and they knew the cause of the flood, which was the sin of men. And they knew the place of salvation. They knew where Christ would be born. They knew that the only solution to the troubles of the world was Christ, who was the Messiah to come. And they also knew that man was not made for this earth, that he is a wayfarer, a traveler. They learned this during their 40 years in the desert, that they traveled and traveled, and they will continue to travel until they arrive at the kingdom of heaven. And they knew also that the Messiah, when he would come, that Jesus Christ, the God, Messiah, God made man, when he would come, he would fulfill the prophecies, and he would prove that he was of God. And this is rational. The others did not know these things, and therefore they were not men, but animals. And Matthew, who preached to the Jews, was the rational gospel. He begins with the heredity of Christ. Christ goes all the way back to Adam. Christ goes all the way back to Abraham. Christ is a true descendant of Adam, and therefore he can be the redeemer of the sins of Adam. In order to be the redeemer of the sins of Adam, he must be the son of Adam. He must have a connection to Adam, and so on. And then he preached to the Jews. And Matthew wrote his gospel, St. Matthew wrote his gospel in Hebrew. The other gospels were written in Greek. All four written by Jews, but three in Greek, one in Hebrew. And St. Matthew wrote to the Jews the rational gospel. And so the first way to come to God, God gave us a mind. The first step is to open our eyes and see the miracles of the church, to see the teaching of the church and how it fits the order in creation, and to see that only the church is consistently in existence from the time of Adam until the present day, until the time of Christ, until the present day. That is the same church of the last 6,000 years, 2,000 years since Christ in our Holy Roman Catholic Church. And so the rational gospel, the first step, the mind. But then we arrive at the second step, St. Luke, and St. Mark. St. Mark was a lion. And a lion fights. A lion is a fighter. And it's interesting about the fighting, it's only the second stage. First we understand. When we go before the bishop, when we're confirmed, he tells you that you must be confirmed and strengthened in the faith. Why must we be confirmed and strengthened in the faith? Because once we have the faith, someone's going to try to take it from us. The devil is going to try to take it from us. Once we have the gospel in our hearts and we realize it is the truth, it will not stay because it is the truth. Even though we know it is the truth, it has a tendency to fall out of our heads. It has a tendency to fall out of our hearts. And so the rational gospel is the first step. But there is another thing that must be done. We must go to the level of the lion. The lion defends. And the lion fights. And the lion fights for his faith. And therefore St. Mark, as the fathers tell us, he was the man, the disciple, that was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was sneaking around the garden, and he was behind the trees, and he was watching the mob as they came to find Christ. And he saw the apostles run away, and he thought he was safely hidden. And Mark is the one that tells us that one of the soldiers, when he was chasing the apostles, he saw a man, and he chased him, and he grabbed onto his cloak, and that man ran away naked. And some of the fathers tell us that that man was Mark, one of the hidden disciples who was there. And so he ran away. And he ran away in the beginning, for he was a coward. He ran away in the beginning because he was afraid, and he lost his cloak. But then, after the resurrection, and after he received the faith fully, he became a lion. And Mark, of course, was the disciple of St. Peter. And St. Peter defends the faith as the Pope. And St. Mark tells us the gospel from the ear of St. Peter. And therefore he defends the faith by defending the faith, by defending the truth, by apologetics. And this is the second level of the defense of the faith. But these levels are kind of external, and they have not yet entered the heart. Now we enter the third level, which is the level of the physician, the level of St. Luke, the level of the healing of the heart. We must defend. In defending, we have wounds. We must believe. In believing, we learn, but somehow it's hard to get down into our hearts. And so the third level of the gospel is the level of St. Luke. This is the level of the oxen. The oxen is very slow. The oxen is very calm. We see that very much in India. Very often, because the cows, they wander the streets. The most thing noticeable about the cow is that he never gets stressed out. The cow is in the streets. The cow is walking across the streets. A bus goes 2 inches by a cow at 400 miles an hour, and he's busy ruminating. And he doesn't jump. He doesn't run. He has no fear. He's just ruminating. He's just going to drink his water. He's just going to eat. The cow sleeps in the middle of the road. The bus comes, and the bus drives around the cow. And so the cows don't get stressed out in India. The cows just keep on going. They're just steady. They're just calm. And they're also worried only about what they must do. They're not worried about the others. They're not concerned about other things. Steady and calm and ruminating and pulling a plow. And this is the third level of the supernatural life. Yes, you must fight, but that's easy. Lions fight. They fight for 1 minute, and they sleep for 23 hours. Fighting doesn't take much time, though it must be done. It takes a lot of energy, so we need rest. But the oxen, he just keeps going. And in this keeping of going, the wounds of the heart are healed. In this keeping of going, the faith is strengthened. In this keeping going, the strength of the lion, he becomes stronger. And when he goes back to fight, he will fight more bravely. The reason becomes deeper, because as the cow walks and ruminates, he learns more about the rational gospel. He learns more about how a lion really fights. And so he strengthens the lion, and he strengthens the man. And so the oxen, of course, how is this done? And the evangelists, the saints tell us, Father of the Church tell us, St. Luke is the gospel of Mary. So he is the gospel of the Blessed Virgin Mary. He is the one that tells us, my soul doth magnify the Lord. He is the one that tells us about the miracles of the child of our Lord Jesus Christ. He is the one that tells us the most about the Blessed Virgin Mary. And Mark, he was the disciple of Peter. Luke, he was the disciple of Mary. Matthew, he was a publican. And so then, now we arrive at the fourth and most sacred gospel. St. Luke, the gospel today, the gospel of the physician, the healing of the soul, the strengthening of the soul through the Blessed Virgin Mary. And then they arrive at the fourth gospel, which is the eagle. And the fathers tell us the face of the eagle, the angel with the face of an eagle, this is St. John, for he is the divine gospel. He is the one that flies over the other three. He goes deeper into the sea. He goes higher into the air. And he is the most divine gospel, the great gospel of eagle. The gospel of the eagle, the gospel of St. John. He is the one who is simply called the beloved of Christ. When we read the gospel of St. John, we hear that he is the beloved of Christ, the one whom Christ loved. How do we get loved by Christ? How do we learn to put our heads upon the heart of Christ at the right time? The wisdom of St. John was shown on Holy Thursday night, when St. John did not know it was the Last Supper. He did not know that Jesus Christ would die the next day. He did not know it was the end of his time with him. But he sensed, because of the sensitivity of his pure heart, and because of his love of Christ, and because of Christ's special love of him, that this was a most sacred supper. Therefore, he put his head upon the heart of Christ. In that very moment when Christ would offer the first holy sacrifice of the Mass, when Judas would be the most scandalized and walk out from the supper and quickly bring about his crucifixion. And the apostles would go back to being like St. Matthew and just try to understand the gospel as if it's some kind of catechism. So St. Philip would say, now thou speakest plainly, now we believe, now we know that thou art the Son of God. He had been speaking plainly for the last 3 years. He had been performing miracles for the last 3 years. They should have known he was God well before this. But they want more proof, and more proof, and more proof, and more proof. And now Philip believes more than he ever did before. And in 3 hours, Philip shall run away from Christ. The same John, something else happens inside of his heart. He enters into the divine nature of the gospel. He begins to see God in every word that God speaks. He begins to hear the divine love in all the words of Christ. He begins to see the divine love inside of the Holy Mass. And this is the fourth level. It flies above all the other. Notice concerning these 4 levels of the gospel. St. Matthew will tell us nothing different than St. John. St. Mark will tell us nothing different than St. Luke and St. John. These 4 gospels are 4 narrations of the true historical events around the life of Jesus Christ, who is God and man. Not one of them will tell you something that contradicts the other. We'll find the same essential story and the same exact story of the birth and death of Christ in all 4 of the Gospels, and of his miracles. St. John will mention a few miracles that the others do not mention, that they leave out. But they will all speak of the same truth. There will be no difference between the 4 Gospels. And yet there are 4 stages. 4 stages of the knowledge and love of God. 4 stages of the increase in the supernatural life. 4 different mysteries of the understanding of Christ. The mystery of the man, who is an angel that flies on the face of a man. The mystery of a lion, the head of a lion, then an angel that flies. And the mystery of a physician, the mystery of the oxen, the mystery of and then the mystery of the eagle. And we'll find, as we travel through the supernatural life and travel through the gospel in our own lives, that we will travel in 4 different ways. And we'll never travel to another gospel. We'll never travel to another doctrine. We'll never travel to another commandment. We'll never travel to another sacrament. There will always be 7 sacraments. There will always be 10 commandments. There will always be 12 articles of the creed. There will always be the same truths of faith. But there are many levels in which we can travel into the beauty and depth of that faith, because our God is infinite. No matter how deep we go, it's deeper that we can travel. No matter how high we go, there's further we can go. And it will never leave the universe of the faith. We will never find the depths of the faith. We will never find the heights of the faith. And when we enter into heaven, we will see God face to face. We will revisit Matthew with our minds, the minds of men. We will revisit Mark as lions. We will revisit Luke, the great St. Luke, the patron today, as cows and oxen. We will revisit St. John as eagles. With all four of these faces, we will see Christ face to face. And for all eternity, we will never see all that can be seen. We will never sound the depths. Therefore, we will be able to chase Christ forever in heaven with these four faces of the four evangelists. And yet, we will never lose Him, and we will never move to another place, because we will always have Him. And so much for a little bit concerning the mysteries of the Holy Gospel, and today the great Gospel of St. Luke, and then the Gospel of the Blessed Virgin Mary. God bless you all, and in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.